I'm Kimberly Lawson Roby, and this is the Woman God Created You to Be podcast. The Woman God Created You to Be podcast is for the woman who wants to become the very best she can be in all areas of her life, and it is my sincere prayer that together you and I will be able to do just that. Thank you so much for taking this journey with me, and here's today's episode. I am, of course, grateful for every single day that God allows me to wake up in my right mind, something my grandmother used to say every morning, but I also can't help being happy about the year 2020 coming to an end, because as you and I both know, it has been absolutely heartbreaking and beyond devastating. In fact, I believe this has been by far the toughest year I have witnessed in my entire life. Because just think about it. Millions of people have contracted the virus. Many have become gravely ill. And sadly, nearly 2 million people have lost their lives worldwide. But as much as we have suffered and lost this year in so many ways, what I also know is that God is still God, and that I will continue to trust Him and keep my faith strong through all of it. I'm doing this because as much as it may not seem like it right now, this too shall pass. Just as with any other trials or tribulations we are faced with, things will get better. And when they do, we need to be ready. Which means it's now time more than ever before to ask yourself if you truly and wholeheartedly know what your purpose is. Because if you do, then it's time for you to fully begin walking in it. And if you don't, it's time for you to discover it. It's time for you to make purpose a top priority in your life for 2021. As for me, it was many years before I truly knew what my purpose was, and this was partly the reason that in my book, The Woman God Created You to Be, I wrote a chapter entitled Hearing God's Call and Finding Your Purpose. And one of the things I talk about toward the beginning of that chapter is the fact that when I was a young girl, I didn't hear much conversation on that particular subject. My parents certainly encouraged my brothers and I to get good grades in school, and there was also a lot of talk about going to college, but again, the word purpose wasn't really discussed. Then, as it turned out, when I became an adult, I mainly focused on money and how much of it I thought I could earn from whatever career path I decided to pursue. For the most part, I spent my entire childhood thinking about which profession would pay me the most money, and by the time I was ready to graduate from high school, I'd made up my mind to become an attorney, a gynecologist, a TV anchor woman, a newspaper or magazine journalist, a certified public accountant, and a paralegal. The list was long and varied because, again, I wasn't concerned about my true purpose. I also never considered the fact that God had placed me on this earth to serve others in a specific way. I just knew I wanted to earn an above-average salary so I could live a comfortable life. More than anything, I wanted to do what my parents had done, which was pay their bills on time and save for rainy days, so to speak. This was all fine and well, but what I soon learned after working in 10 different positions in a 10-year period was that I wasn't happy, and that unless I sat down and figured out something different, I was never going to be. And this was when I finally had to stop and ask God to help me. I asked Him what it was I was supposed to be doing, and it wasn't long before He reminded me of my childhood years and how not only had I loved writing, but many of my teachers had complimented my writing as well. Especially my 6th grade teacher, Mr. George Groff, whom I'll never forget and who regularly encouraged me to write and follow a career with it. But of course, even though I heard him, I didn't take his words as seriously as I should have. Then, when I entered junior high school, I took a journalism class, which I loved. But once again, I didn't take my love for writing seriously, and it certainly never dawned on me that writing was connected to my overall purpose. Because just as I said earlier, purpose wasn't something I thought about or had heard much about at all. Then fast forwarding to my high school years, once I did a bit of research on writing careers and discovered their less than above average salary ranges, I decided right then and there that I wasn't going to become a professional writer. But this is the reason I advise young people to never let money become the deciding factor when they're trying to figure out what they're going to be doing with a huge part of the rest of their lives. It's also the reason I'm encouraging you not to focus on money either. There is no doubt that we all need to earn a living. We need to be able to take care of ourselves and be financially responsible, even if for now that means working on a job or in a career that has nothing to do with our purpose. But what I can also tell you from experience is that when you do discover your purpose, if you do what God has given you to do, the money will come. When you walk in your purpose, God will provide for you in more ways than you were hoping for. Because as much as I passed on majoring in something writing related when I was young and in college, it wasn't until I was 30 years old that I made the decision to sit down and begin writing my first book. And it also wasn't until then that everything turned around for the better. Then, if that wasn't already a blessing, I never imagined that I would ultimately write 28 of them. But again, none of this happened until I was 30 because I didn't begin trying to discover my purpose until then. All because for so many years, I ignored God's calling on my life and I did what I wanted to do. I followed my own plans and never bothered to check with God to see what He wanted. But just imagine how miserable I would still be had I not stopped and prayed. Imagine what would have happened had I not realized that God and only God could show me and confirm to me what my purpose was. This, of course, leads me to my question for you. Are you focused on what you believe is best for you instead of what God wants for you? Because if so, let me say this. Our plans will never compare to what God has planned for us. Not ever. Why? Because just as Proverbs 19:21 from the New Living Translation says, you can make many plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail. Which means all we have to do is hear His call, take it seriously, and wait for His instructions. And from there, all we need to do is use each of the amazing gifts, talents, and abilities He has given us so we can rightfully serve others. Yes, it is true that depending on what God has called you to do, you might find yourself hesitant about stepping out on faith, and you might even allow fear to cripple you. But if you truly trust Him, believe me with every part of your being that God will give you everything you need so that you can boldly and fully walk in your purpose. He will equip you with every ounce of what you need so that you can help as many people as possible. He will give you the ability to do what He has placed you on this beautiful earth to do. And there's something else I want you to remember too. God can use anyone or anything to push you into your purpose. That company that laid you off or fired you, that friend who made you believe you were crazy to think your dreams could ever come to pass, that family member who told you straight to your face that you would never amount to anything. Or God can even use the very messy divorce you may have just gone through to push you into your purpose. Because please know that God can and will use whatever He sees fit to elevate and empower you so that He can carry you completely into your destiny. Now for the 3 things you can do as it relates to today's topic. Number 1, go into deep prayer. Pray and ask God to guide you. Ask Him to specifically show you what your purpose is. Ask Him how He wants you to carry out that purpose and how He wants you to use it to help serve others. This is what I had to do. And while many years ago, I did discover that writing and speaking were connected to my purpose, it wasn't until 4 years ago that I began praying for God to show me how He wanted me to use the writing and speaking gifts He had given me. And it was only then that He confirmed my purpose for me, which is to help women become all God created them to be, spiritually, personally, and professionally. Number 2, think back to what you loved doing as a child, something you loved doing so much that hours could pass by, yet you never seemed to grow tired of it. Because the one thing I can tell you is that so much of what you love doing as a child has everything to do with your assigned purpose. I know for me, even as a child, I loved conversing with others and asking questions about things I wasn't familiar with. And in school, I was always getting into trouble for talking way too much in class. But now, churches, libraries, colleges, universities, and various women's organizations will invite me to serve as keynote speaker for their events. So again, think about what you loved doing back then and what you may actually still love doing today. Was it cleaning? If so, have you considered starting your own cleaning service? Was it cooking? If so, are you preparing to start your own catering business? Was it singing or painting? Or maybe when you were growing up, you'd always wanted to help families become first-time home buyers. If so, are you working on getting your real estate license? Or maybe when you were a child, you had a great love for numbers. If so, Have you considered going back to school to become an accountant? Or maybe later in life you discovered this great love for planning parties. If so, have you been debating back and forth as to whether you should start an event planning business? Or maybe you always loved sewing. If so, have you started designing your own clothing? Or it could be that God has called you to lead a particular ministry. For example, a women's prison ministry, a singles ministry, a marriage ministry, or a women's Bible study ministry. Or it may be that you've always wanted to become a nurse or a doctor, because if so, please know that it still isn't too late to begin working toward professions that require a lot of schooling either. Know that it is never too late to follow your purpose, no matter what that purpose is. And number 3, begin a planning process, because once you know what your purpose is, the very first thing you'll want to do is research everything you can about it. Learn everything you can about it. For example, 6 months before I launched this podcast, I enrolled in a 9-module online training course. Also, don't be afraid to ask others who have a similar purpose as yours if they would be willing to answer any questions you might have. And study what they're doing. Pay attention to what's working for them and what's not. Then, once you've done quite a bit of learning and planning, map out everything you'll need to get going with it and decide on a start date. I also want to mention, too, that certain aspects of your purpose may not always include financial rewards, and there are times when parts of it won't necessarily mean that you'll be positioned out in the forefront. Sometimes your purpose may involve serving 10 or 20 people versus 10 or 20 million. Sometimes service can mean becoming the key person in the background, and there is nothing wrong with that. Or serving others might simply mean taking an elderly person to a doctor's appointment, cooking food and delivering it to the sick and shut-in, volunteering to help single mothers who might be struggling in one area or another, or donating clothes to a homeless shelter. I'm sharing this with you because what I've learned myself is that God can call us to do anything at all, and our job is to simply be ready and willing to answer Him. And finally, here's a scripture to help you even further. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to His purpose. Romans 8:28, New King James Version. Well, I guess that's it for today. And as always, I pray that our time together has been a blessing to you in at least some way. And I look forward to connecting with you next week for my first episode of 2021. Until then, please stay safe, have a very happy new year, and know that I am praying all of God's wonderful blessings for you and your family always. Thank you so much for listening. And if you'd like to receive further encouragement, please check out the companion book for this podcast, The Woman God Created You to Be: Finding Success Through Faith, Spiritually, Personally, and Professionally. Also, if you'd like to discuss today's topic or share a personal story, please visit me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Then, so you won't miss a single episode, please subscribe to the podcast or follow it through your favorite listening app or website. And if you would, please write a review and recommend the show to others. Until next time, much love, God bless, and thanks again.